Okay, I'm just gonna record this and yeah, I feel like we can probably dive in. A few more people will probably trickle in as time goes on, but let's just get started. So, hello everyone. Welcome to this. I'm going to have the chat open to the side of my screen so that if you have any questions or anything, I can just always click back and view it. But my name is Daniel Sproul. I'm a Unity developer. I've got some slides in here about me, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself, about the course, and then we're going to dive in. And this will be just a little bit of an intro into game development. So, first of all, welcome. I'm guessing you're here because you either like video games or you have some interest in a career as a game developer. I've been a game developer for the past 7 to 8 or so years, and it's a really awesome career path. So, welcome to the first step on your journey. Okay, so first, let's do the logistical stuff. What is Black Screen AI? It's a bunch of lectures and classes to teach all different kinds of fields. My particular course is going to be in game development, and we're going to go through the process of creating two games in Unity, and with the core goal of getting you ready for job interviews, getting you ready with a portfolio, and getting you comfortable in Unity development. Yeah, loads of graduates, loads of students. So there's an established history at Black Screen. Look at all these fun pictures. We're gonna move on, and you can check it out on YouTube if you want to see a couple of success stories or anything. I'm not gonna play them right now because I feel like that would take up a little bit of our time. But yeah, you can see this is a really awesome slide. It shows where all the different amazing Fortune 500 companies that a bunch of black screen grads have gone on to, and just about every major company you can think of, and many more. Okay, so welcome to the first live class. There's another one tomorrow. Today we're going to be diving into sort of the surface level of game development, things you should keep in mind, how to get started and whatnot. But then tomorrow we're actually going to dive into Unity, and you'll get to see a lot of the inner workings of a game. I think they both work well in conjunction because it's like, okay, let's talk about before the game, and now let's talk about an actual game. But who's this handsome fella on the screen? That's me, Daniel Sproul. This picture's a little zoomed in. Thanks for that. Yeah, I'm a Unity developer, game industry pro with 8 years of experience. I've worked on a lot of really awesome, interesting titles, and I'm going to go through the slides and brag more about the things that I've done. But I think one thing that's really important to my story is that I started from a similar place as all of you guys. Like well, maybe that's on a future slide, but spoiler alert, I went to school for electrical engineering, and then during my senior year, I sort of realized, I would rather make games. And so I was making my own game, and then I got my degree in electrical engineering and decided to not do a single electrical engineering thing and instead pursue game development full time. And I landed a gig, and the rest is history. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so this is that first game that I mentioned. I think it's very important when learning Unity, when learning game development, to just dive in, to do something. And in the top left, you'll see Rollerball. I think Unity's actually phased out this, but this was the first tutorial I ever did in Unity. And you roll a ball and you collect cubes, and you get 10 points for every cube, and that's a game. And that was my first project. And then I took what I learned from that and released my first game. Now, my first game, it's a little shabby. It's a little, but it's we all come from somewhere, right? And so I released this game called Pyramid Run. And I'm not sure if many people are familiar with the game Cubert. It's this old school arcade game, but basically I made Cubert, but with a bunch of different power-ups, different types of enemies. I love it. It was really fun, but ultimately, like, it was just a game that I did for fun and released on the App Store because sometimes as a game developer, you really should just put things out there into the world in order to try things out. Moving on from there, I decided to be a little bit more ambitious, and I took my knowledge of all of that, learned a bunch more tutorials, and I tried to create my own online shooter game. And so the idea was to create, and I still think this is a good idea. The idea was to create an educational shooter game with like water guns so that kids could play it. And the core idea was that kids need to learn, but they want to play video games. So what if we could squeeze learning as part of the gameplay of the game? And I had so much fun working on this. I like one of the most satisfying things about game development is that you get to um, I'm not sure if you've ever done like the long track of dominoes where it runs around a bunch and then you knock one over and then you watch them all fall down. That's what game development is. You tell the enemies to behave a certain way. You tell the game to function a certain way, and then you get to play against it, and it challenges you. And it's such an interesting thing that I don't think a lot of fields have, where it has its own intelligence battling against you. And I don't know, it's really cool. Also, thank you, iPhone. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And it's one that I'll pursue at some point. Honestly, this was something that I was building on my own. I was like sleeping on a friend's couch, doing the whole startup thing, and I was like, no, this is going to be great. But eventually, I moved on. Oh, wait. Okay, we're going to skip this slide. I moved on to Tops Digital. And Tops Digital was my first official job. And it was a beautiful opportunity with Tops. You might be familiar with Tops, the trading card company, like they traditionally do baseball cards. But I got a job at Tops, and we released two games, Marvel and Disney Collect, where you're ripping open packs, you're collecting cards, and it was just a really great experience. But again, I had two games in my portfolio. I had Pyramid Run and I had Hydro Flash. And during the actual job interview, I like pulled up my laptop and I was like, yeah, I can show you this game and we could play multiplayer. And like you can see let's look at it. It's a little rough looking, the trees in the background. It's not the most beautiful game, but they could see the core of that game there. And then I got an entry level position at Tops, and I absolutely loved it there. Oh, I see that someone checked out Pyramid Run. Yeah, I will say I'm surprised it's still on the App Store. I thought Google like took it down because whatever. Anyway, basically you have to keep your like updates up to like you have to implement the latest operating system and all of these things that I have not updated that game in quite some time. Oh, when you do start it. Oh, thanks, Felix. So after Tops, I started work at Nerd Ninjas, and Nerd Ninjas is where I've been the longest because I absolutely love it here. You can see the little ninja in my background. That's my company, Nerd Ninjas. We're an indie studio with about 50 people, and we've done some really awesome things. The first project I got to work on was this game called Catan World Explorers. Not sure if there's any Settlers of Catan fans in the house, but this was a game where it's based on Pokemon Go, kind of, because we were working with Niantic, the creators of Pokemon Go. But you're like building settlements, and it was a very fun game. However, all good things must come to an end. And so then my next project, I actually worked on Pokemon Go. And this was just I couldn't have asked for a better learning experience in the world of game development. There's this established code base with all of these different ways of viewing problems that I hadn't experienced before. And I think it was great. I actually implemented a couple of really awesome features in Pokemon Go and deeply, deeply loved my time there. Also, if you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to type it in the chat. I'm here doing the back and forth and more than happy to. Oh, I love talking about myself. I'll talk about this all day long. But no, we'll get into the nitty-gritty. I think it's important to talk through my journey so that you all can see how realistic it is. It's one thing I don't love is when someone tells me their success story and they're like, yeah, you can do it too. But their success story is built on like luck or built on like getting $100,000 from their parents or something. But I worked on Pyramid Run and you can see how it looks. I worked on Hydro Flash, and both of these games gave me a lot of experience to actually get a job in the industry at Tops working on Marvel Collect, and then I got a job at an indie studio working on games. How did the ooh, ooh, ooh. Okay, I see a couple questions. I understand we can make games that work with blockchain. Can you elaborate if this is true? Uh okay, so this is definitely not my area of expertise, blockchain, Web3, all that. It's you can interact with any. I'm assuming it's just endpoints. I think that it's fully possible to make games that interact with Web3 and all that. I am unfortunately not the best person to ask this question because I have no experience in it. But I will say it's possible. There are definitely companies out there doing it, but it's not something that I've ever done. How did the initial pitch from Pokemon Go go? So I will say I worked on Pokemon Go after it blew up. So Pokemon Go is still one of the top grossing apps on the App Store. And so I worked on it after like the major hump. And I actually was working on it I'd say about 2 years ago, and I worked on it for 2 years. And it was just a really enjoyable time. I love Pokemon. It's such a beautiful, fun, little, adorable intellectual property, and I think a lot of people's hearts are with the IP. Another project that I worked on was NBA All World, which was another Pokemon Go style real world game with the NBA. You might never have heard of it because it was canned pretty quickly after launch, unfortunately. So that's kind of how the game industry goes. Sometimes you launch something to huge fanfare, sometimes you launch something and it's not making enough money, and then the people above you say, okay, well, we need to cut this because it's costing too much to run, blah, 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 or whatnot. But, another cool game in your belt. And then probably I should have gotten a different screenshot, but the biggest, most epic, fun thing, and I'm sort of telling the story that I started here, was Rogue Pinata's VR Mageddon. This is what I count as my first official game launch, and this game launched literally last Thursday. Woo! I'm super hyped. This is a VR game that I've been working with the team on, and we've been building it for about a year and a half. And I'm not sure if you guys have ever played Vampire Survivors or one of those other quote unquote bullet hell games, but it's very similar, except it's whimsical. There's wonky little piñatas that are all up in your face, and you're trying to shoot them with a taser made out of crochet needles and Christmas lights. You can check it out. It's a really awesome game. I think it's really beautiful. We're getting a lot of positive feedback, and yeah, I've this is the moment that I've been working so hard for, and that I hope you all get to experience of releasing a game. And actually, there's a couple of industry vets on the team who sort of sat us all down and said, "Hey, just let's all pause and think about things for a second because this is a huge moment in the game industry. So many people work on games for 5, 10 years, and then they don't launch, because of one reason or another, conflicts of interest, all various things. But we launched this game. It's doing well. You can look it up, Rogue Pinata's VR Armageddon, if you have a VR device. It's super awesome. And if you have any questions about that process or anything, happy to answer them. Um, yeah, a little bit more about me outside of professionally. We've done the professional arc. Here's me. I'm in New York City, as I mentioned earlier. I love doing improv. I do improv comedy. I perform every Wednesday. And I think that it's very important. I think that some people, I'm not sure if there's any Stardew Valley fans out there, but a lot of people saw Stardew Valley's success and heard the story of the developer who kind of just like locked himself in a room and would work on this game for like 12 hours each day or some crazy numbers. And I think a lot of people get it in their mind that that's what game development is. But no, there are healthier ways to make games. And yes, I love Stardew Valley as well. It's one of the few games that like locks me in and I get addicted and I have to stop. But I think it's very important to have left brain, right brain activities or things where you okay, I'm developing this. How can I stretch my creative muscle? How can I stretch my logical muscle and all these things? Because it's you end up building better games. The people who try to mechanically make a game and say, okay, well, this mechanic with this algorithm should do this, and then people should download this because this is objectively the best, that never works. And it's always about finding the fun and genuinely enjoying what you like to do because that's what comes through the most. Um, and I'll talk a lot more about that throughout the course today and kind of just like how to maintain the joy of game development even through the tough parts. I'm not gonna pretend. Like I think a lot of people see the game development industry and they think, whoa, you're making games, you're playing games all day. And it's not that. It's very far from that. There are a lot of moments where you're banging your head against your monitor, like, oh my gosh, why isn't my code compiling? Why isn't this working the way I want it to? With Rogue Pinata's VR Armageddon, it's on a VR device. And so we had so many performance issues. And so we were profiling it and going through the nitty gritty of like, why is this code taking 250 milliseconds while this one's only taking 220? And like that, I will say, is not the most fun, not the most engaging thing, but the overall process, oh, wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. What else do I do? I obviously play a lot of video games. Been playing a lot of Marvel Rivals recently. I just started playing Hades again, and man, these are good games. I love experimenting with all the new games that come out because it just pops so many ideas into your brain and you're like, "Oh, this is what roguelites are looking like now," or "Oh, this is what a hero shooter is looking like." And I think that you have to be knowledgeable about the industry in order to do your own thing. Okay, that's a lot. Let's breathe in. Let's dive into the nitty gritty of the course. So there's 5 tips that we're going to go through, and I'm kind of just going to talk through them and what they've meant for me and my career. Again, I strongly encourage you, if you have any thoughts or ideas, just jot them down in the chat. I think this is a relatively quick presentation and everything, but it's really, I'm here for you. So this is how you sort of decide if you want to take the course or whatnot, and hopefully get a little bit more excited about game development. Yes. Oh, yeah. I think honestly, what Joshua just said in the chat, I genuinely think that Hades might be one of the best games to come out in the past 10 years. I think it's a beautiful game, the soundtrack's amazing, and it's everything I aspire to do when making games. And, indie studios, I love when indie studios put out games and it's not just AAA studios that dominate the landscape. Yeah, yeah. Good taste in games. Okay. So let's start with the first tip. 5 tips to start up your career in game dev. First, take a step back. Recognize that games are built on some ridiculously complex systems. I think that sometimes people dive in head first and they say, okay, well, I want to make this game. I want to make a game where you're rubber duckies on a boat, shooting at other rubber duckies on another boat. And then you're like, okay, well, we need a boat, we need the rubber duckies, and you start building everything when you don't even have a foundation. I think that one thing I recommend doing is whiteboarding. Whiteboarding is very popular in the game industry, where you write down a ton of idea. You just write down every idea. During Rogue Pinatas, we actually had a whiteboarding session. We used this thing called Figma, which is sort of like an online whiteboard, and just like sticky notes, sticky note this, sticky note that. What if we want it to be weird and funny? How can we make it weird and funny? Oh, what if the pinatas make funny faces? What if weird things pop out of them? What if this? What if that? And I think that whiteboarding sessions are just a great way to get the creative juices flowing. Do I think it's the most efficient way to uh, develop ideas? No. But it's pretty good. It's pretty collaborative. And it allows you to really dive into all of the nitty-gritty. Or not the nitty-gritty, the opposite of the nitty-gritty. The gritty nitty? I don't know. Whatever the big picture things. But it's important to have the big picture before you dive in to the complex systems that build these games. Like, for instance, take a game like Hades. They didn't just start by saying, okay, you're Zagreus and you want to battle your way out of the underworld and say, okay, let's do that. Let's build this. No, they said, okay, so what systems are we going to have in our game? And this is me putting an idea in your head. Before you even make your first game, think about the systems. And you're if you don't remember anything else, just remember that every game is just a collection of systems running together in parallel and series that define gameplay. I think a lot of people focus on the other thing. Like, you can make a game look pretty in like a week, but to get a core complex system that's actually functional and works well takes so much time and takes so much specific effort. So yes, point one, games are built on really complex logic systems, and it's important to not underestimate how much goes into that. Mm. Good water. Water is great. Step number two, you need to know how to code. There's no way around it in the current state of game development. You there technically I shouldn't even say this. I shouldn't say this. Pretend I didn't say this. But it's technically possible to make a game in Unreal without knowing how to code. Will you make the best game? No. Will it reach its true potential? No. No matter what, you're going to need to learn to code. Good news is that coding's pretty easy. Coding it's just like math. And maybe that's a bad thing to say because I don't know that everyone loves math as much as I do. But I think that math is just a set of fundamental rules that you can combine in complex ways. So, for instance, take like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Okay, we know how all of these function on their own. Now you can string them together. What's 5 plus 2 times 10 divided by 8, and you can string all of these things together and get more complex pieces. And that's exactly what game development is. We take small chunks and then those become larger chunks and then we combine them into a system. So no matter what, you're definitely going to need to learn how to code. But the good news is that coding is pretty simple to get started with, and with Unity, it's not coding. They do call it languages, and it is kind of like learning another language, but you're not going to be doing flashcards where it's like, oh, what does this mean? What does that mean? Instead, it's a new way of thinking. And once you have that way of thinking down, then it's a walk in the park, like a for loop. Like, okay, I'm going to iterate over a list of enemies and I need to iterate over the number of enemies. And so for each enemy, I'm going to do this. It's just a little twist of the brain to figure out how to do things differently. But yes, unfortunately, you must you must learn how to code. Okay, there's a couple of comments. Warhammer games take after tabletop systems. Yeah, actually, so I love playing board games. I have a huge board game collection behind me. And I a lot of there's a lot of blend between board games and video games. I think that obviously Baldur's Gate 3 is a very clear example of how D&D can be translated into a video game, but I think like a lot of the concepts like behind the scenes of a lot of games, it's the equivalent of like rolling dice or whatnot, you know? Like how do you decide how fast a player moves? Well, maybe there's a speed value, but maybe how do you decide what loot they get at the end of a treasure run? Well, it's the equivalent of a dice roll, right? You know, there's 10 different numbers you can get and whatnot. Blueprints and Unreal are good for yeah. I fully agree. Yeah, I'm gonna admit I'm not the best in Unreal. I've dipped my toes in. I'm a Unity dev through and through. But yeah, you can't. You cannot get by without coding in Unity, but there are ways that you can do things in Unity, Unreal without coding, but no matter what, get into your mind, you're gonna need to learn to code or continue your studies in coding. I don't know where everyone comes in at. Okay. Kind of tangential to my first point or previous point rather. Use Unity. Now, I'm gonna go through. There's three primary engines out there. There's Unity. Unity is the best. I will fight anyone on this point. Unity is the best game engine out there. It's the best one. It's without a doubt the best one for a beginner to use, but it's also easy for big game studios to use. Um, what I believe Hollow Knight was built in Unity. Rocket League. What's the Assassin's Creed is the common example of a game built in Unity. Now, if you've heard of Unity, you probably know it gets a little bit of a bad rep because it's so easy to learn that like a lot of the Android like trash games on the App Store, you'll see that Unity splash screen and you'll say, "Uh-oh, what is this game?" And so I think it's quite easy to learn, but a lot of people learn it and quickly like throw out garbage onto the app stores, which is probably why I think it gets a little bit of a bad rep. Unreal Engine is probably the one that you've seen the most in gaming. It is great for making really beautiful games. Dragon Ball Fighters. There's a ton of game. Most big AAA titles are done in Unreal. I will say that learning Unreal, it's a little harder to get into the industry because I think Unity is a lot easier to do as a hobby dev and then get an entry level position doing Unity development because Unreal is largely used for AAA games like the big major releases. It can be a little bit harder to get your foot in the door for those sort of positions, which is why the course is in Unity. It's why I love Unity. I'm gonna be honest, I would not trade Unity for the world, except for Unity as a company made a couple bad decisions, but then they backed out of those bad decisions. So you know we give them a pat on the back, and we say good job. Now Godot is a third option. Godot is open source, which we love to hear. We love open source, and it's actually very similar to Unity. Um, but it's got its quirks. It's still in its infancy, so I wouldn't strongly recommend Godot, especially not for an indie dev just getting started, learning things on your own. There isn't as much of an existing framework for you to learn Godot. That's not to say that there aren't people out there doing tutorials or answering questions. It's just that Unity is so much larger. Like the amount of people who use Unity, there's so much of a larger community of both indie devs, indie studios, and even AAA studios that are releasing major games that if you ask a question on forum, you're going to get a response like that. As long as it's a thorough, well asked question. If you type, "Why isn't my code running?" Well, good luck. Good luck getting your code answered. But that's not to say that Godot should be counted out or anything. I think that it's a good one to keep in your mind, keep in your back pocket. I have a lot of coworkers that are checking out Godot, doing their own personal things in Godot. It's free, which appeals to a lot of people because Unity, after a certain point, you have to like pay them per users. Unreal, after you make your first $1 million, you have to start paying them. So Godot use just free forever. I see the question, is the coding language used the same? Yes. So Unity uses C sharp and Godot also uses C sharp. I'm not sure. For me, in college, I learned a little bit of Java, and I would say C sharp isn't too far from Java. It does have its own quirks, have its own usages and whatnot, but C sharp is also a great intro language. I know that Python is another intro language a lot of people use. I would say it's a bit more of a cousin to Python. I'd say C sharp and Java are brothers. Python's maybe a cousin. But yeah, C sharp is used in both Unity and Godot, and I think it's pretty easy or comparatively easier to learn, um, great to understand, and you can make some pretty powerful things with it. Step number 4. Now we've been building up to this step because I keep alluding to it, but please, please, please start small. Earlier when I told the story of building that online educational shooter game, I think it was a beautiful project. It was really fun. It was a really good experience, but it was just me doing it, you know? And I like take Fortnite, for example. Fortnite has hundreds, if not thousands of people working, maybe hundreds, maybe just hundreds, hundreds of people working day in and day out to keep the servers up, to make optimize everything, make sure that like there's probably someone that like handles like, oh, how do characters feel? How do new characters feel? To do all of these things. And I was trying to do all of that on my own. It was ambitious, but I was no way near. Like there were so many bugs and little errors and things that what I can say, start small. Pyramid Run was a small little project that I built. It was a phone game, it had its own little upgrade screen, and I think that that was a perfect first project. I got to learn how UI worked, I got to learn how to make characters move, animation, all these really key details to a game. I just got to learn that. And I think that the important thing, because so the pathway that I foresee for all of you, if you do decide to continue on with game development, is you take the course and then you have two games already that you built throughout the course. And then you've got a side project that just fun to you, or you tweak one of the games yourself, whatever, just something fun on your own that really gets your personality out there, and then you can add whatever you want to it. Like we're giving you a template that you can build off of, and I think that starting small to build is such a good mentality in the game industry. I have a lot of friends that are making their own games, and I think everyone just starts too big. They say, okay, so we want to be the next blank. And once you're saying we want to be the next Hades, you've already set your sights too high. You should say, okay, I like what they do in Hades. What's a way I could take this part of the game and put my own spin on it? Because that's has a way better success rate than just starting at the top. I recommend trying to copy an existing small scale game that you enjoy. So for me, it was Qbert. I loved Qbert. And so I designed a game around it, and I was like, okay, how can I make these mechanics work? You know? Uh, what I build on the games you made. Actually, yes. So Pyramid Run, I showed you the game a little bit, but I did that senior year of college. And then after I got my job at Tops, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna redesign Pyramid Run. And so I redid all of the menus. I like put all these animations in, and I made it a lot better. I still like the game itself. Just like, it's something I love. I can fully understand why other people would not love it. I even added a high score system. I just added a ton to it. And so I think, yeah, it's great. You create something small, and then over time you add more to it or you do something different with it. And like I was saying, starting with an existing game, now Pong is maybe a little too simple, but maybe there's some angle on it. Like what if it's Pong, but they're like battleships, and what does that mean? I don't know. But like it's really fun to say, okay, I like this about a game. I'm gonna tweak it in just a small way, like Frogger, but you can also shoot the cars. And so now, because Frogger can shoot the cars, it introduces a new element of gameplay, and so then you get to tackle all of these new problems. Yeah, I think cloning a small game, a little platformer game could be fun to get a little bit of work building levels and things like that, getting characters moving around, but keeping it simple. Again, the whole core, like don't you're not building Mario, you're not building Spelunky or anything. You're building your own small test world, or a simple puzzle game. Like, there's a million and one block games out there that like Tetris style or blockbuster bubble shooter games where you like shoot and then it pops and things like that. I think that those are just great because there's so many parts of a game that people forget about. I've seen some really great games that people really great mechanics, but the main menu is terrible. The like pause screen is terrible. Like, there's just so many quality of life things that are terrible because they dove all in on an idea, and then because those things like the App Store page just looks like the elementary school kid designed it. And so I think that it's very important to do something polished and do something good before doing everything. And polish, I could talk about polish forever. But please, 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 when you're making a small project, polish it. If you're making a small bubble shooter game, make a good small bubble shooter game that feels good to play, that looks good. Take time to design a really clean, sleek main menu and make the pause screen nice. I think that as developers, we get into this mindset of, oh, well, I just want to make a cool game. I just want to do the cool stuff for the game. And if you're not doing the other stuff, then unfortunately, people will download your game and they'll say, oh, this looks terrible, and then they'll uninstall. Um, would I say games like Hollow Knight, Stardew Valley, Minecraft are ambitious or small? Okay, all of those are really large, sweeping games. So, to take them, for example, Hollow Knight, if you wanted to make your own Hollow Knight, I would focus on like the mechanics of Hollow Knight. Like, you have a character, you can jump, you can dash, you can move, and you have enemies, and the enemies can attack you. And that is enough to start building the foundation of a game, to take that idea and build a level and see what happens. But I think to start on a project and say, I'm building the next Hollow Knight, way, way too out of scope. Stardew Valley is similar, where there's so many different things happening. Like, okay, well, I need seeds to plant in the ground, but before I can plant in the ground, I need to hoe the ground, and then I plant it, and then I water it, and then it grows over 3 days. And I think that that is just a lot of complex ideas coming together. Amazing game, beautiful game. But for a first game, I'd say maybe, okay, you get the seeds, you put them in the ground, and then what happens? Like what, and then what happens? Like the Stardew Valley is honestly like six different games in one. And you take any one of those games and it's great in its own right. Like the mine system, for example. What if you took the concept of the mines in Stardew Valley and turned that into a really interesting game where every floor you go to is a new regenerated dungeon, and there's a bunch of different chart not charts. What's it called? Skill trees that you can like level up and whatnot. Minecraft, don't don't make Minecraft. If I leave you with one thing, don't make Minecraft. It's so I actually know so many people trying to make their own Minecraft, and I think it's a bit too ambitious. Minecraft actually start like if you look at the game Minecraft is, and then you go back 20 years maybe? Is Minecraft 20 years old? Maybe. If you go back to the first iterations of Minecraft, it was such a smaller game, you know? It's like, okay, you can build this number of things, and you can do this, and you can do this, and that's it. But the dynamic worlds really made Minecraft pop, and then they continually add so much stuff to it. But I think Minecraft, if you wanted to make your own Minecraft, that I would definitely call that ambitious. Minecraft came out in 2011? Huh. It feels is this a moment where no, 14 years. Okay, well that's fine. That's fine. Wolf catching eggs. Yeah, if you want to make wolf catching eggs, I think that is that's a an attainable goal. Is it safe to say Silk Song was too ambitious? Yeah, I think that's I'm not fully caught up with everything that's going on with Silk Song, but just to fill in other people in the room who may not be the most familiar with Hollow Knight, Hollow Knight was this game that was released, loved, beloved by fans, loads of purchases and whatnot, and they have a sequel that's coming out eventually. And I think it's one of those things where like we were talking, you know, you have a core system and then you're like, okay, well, now we're going to do this. Now we're going to do these crazy things. And I would assume that they started too ambitious, that I hear that a lot of developers are getting burnt out on the ideas and the systems and whatnot. But yeah, you start small so that you don't end up there. There's this game I inspired by Stardew Valley. Added horror. Yeah, I think actually, like if you, I think you can trace a line between the history of a lot of games. Like if you really like Hades, you can say, well, Hades was inspired by this mechanic, which was inspired by this mechanic, which was inspired by this mechanic, which was inspired by Doom, because it all goes back to Doom now. But so many games are just little tweaks on the formula. And I think that's what I really love about the system. I mean, it's like TV shows. All or there's like that theory that all stories go back to like six, like there's only six types of stories, or something. Sorry, I like read an article like many years ago, and it stuck with me, but not in enough detail, apparently, that like so many stories can be boiled down to certain component parts. I think you can do the same with games. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, the last tip: don't lose the fun. I think that it's so easy to burn out in the game industry, and games are so complicated, games are so there's so much going on, and bugs are an inevitable part of life. You know, if you're making a game, it will not work the first time because we're human beings. We're fragile, we do things wrong sometimes, and that's okay. But I think it's important to remember, if everyone here, I assume, has some interest in video games, has some joy in their heart that they get from playing, or maybe you're just looking for a more interesting career. I think you have to have that core joy, why you want to do this. I am here because I like this idea, because I like this concept. I always tell people about when I mentioned that I worked at Tops and we were creating card collecting games. And it's so hard to sell someone on a card collecting game. Like, yeah, you open a digital pack and then you have your digital cards and then you look at them and that's the game. And I think this is before NFTs, so I know that's a whole can of worms, but this is before NFTs, and it was a cool idea. I enjoyed it. And they were like rare cards, and they would be released in certain set. Anyway, it's a whole thing. But I loved that game. It was so fun. Was it something I would have played before I got the job? No. Is it something that I still play after I had the job? Also, no. But when I was working on that game, it was the most interesting thing to me in the world. It was this little ecosystem of like trading cards, and it was so fun. And I think that's it. You have to find the joy. I mean, if if you don't end up taking the course, if you don't end up being a game developer, then at least take this one tidbit that like you have to find the fun in life. You have to be the one that chooses to see the joy and the interesting parts of life. And I think with game development, there the industry's notorious for crunch. Luckily, I haven't had too bad of crunch. But crunch is when like you're working like 60-hour weeks or doing crazy hours in a row because you have a deadline on Friday. And I think that it's important during some of the darker moments of like, what's wrong with this bug? Why doesn't anyone know what's wrong or what causes it? To remember, we're bringing joy to a lot of people. We're doing this because we like it and because a lot of people around us like it. Oh, thanks for being real. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important. Like, obviously, I want you all to take the course, and I think that'd be fantastic. But I do want you to make sure you're making the best decision for yourself, and just keep all these ideas in mind. I love game development, but it's not the right thing for everyone. But it is for a lot of people, and I think it's really fun. And it's as fun as it looks, but it's also really not fun at sometimes. Okay, and that's the 5 points. We did it. We made it through the whole thing. Now comes the part where I tell you a little bit more about game development. Again, feel free, hit me up with questions in the chat. But like one of the beauty of game development is that so my company, Nerd Ninjas, is actually fully remote. Like I work from home and all of my coworkers are remote and we have a retreat twice a year and that's when we see each other in person. There's no limits on like gender or age because it's just coding. Like there's so many of the barriers that you might run into in a normal job just are eliminated by that. I mentioned that I didn't like major in game development. I didn't major in software engineering, but I'm still a game developer. I will say, I small caveat, I was an electrical engineer, and being an electrical engineer, you do learn a little bit of coding. So I definitely had a little bit of a leg up, but I had never everything I learned in Unity was self-taught. Yeah, I think let's see, oriented mindset, persistence, there's a lot of bugs. Team player, I small pro tip, just being a team player gets you so far in the industry. I think games are really fun. It's so fun to just bounce ideas off of each other and say, "What about this? What about that? But what about this? But what about that?" And I think that just being open to it, yes anding is always a good thing. And then passion, you can't fake passion. Or maybe you can, but not for very long. And I think that like I mentioned, don't forget the fun, like it's gotta be a core, I want to do this to keep you going. Yeah, I this is one of the points, but like you don't need to know how to code in order to be a game developer. Yeah, exactly, Jeremy. Mm. If it's not fun, what's even the point? Oh, that's a good question actually. What's been my experience working with a team versus solo development? I think that solo development is interesting because it's so unstructured. You're working on all of these different parts of a game, but without the structure of a team, it's hard both to keep yourself to a tight schedule to say, okay, this is what I'm working on, and then this, and then this, and you end up following the fun a little bit like, oh, this would be really fun, and you end up rebuilding the same fun system or playtesting. But I think working on a team and especially working like a job doing game development, there's a lot more fine-tuned. Okay, so this is my project for the next 2 weeks. I get to collaborate. It's a lot less alienating to work on a team. It's nice to, like I said, bounce ideas off of each other. It's a significantly better experience to have at least one other person on the team, if not a full team of developers. The camaraderie is just unmatched. Yeah, it's a good time. Okay. Yeah. Game developers they do make a pretty penny for all the work that that is asked of you. I will say that the entry level positions are definitely lower than this. I think when you're an entry level game developer, you're honestly just trying to get a job, and then the money sort of comes later as you either move to a better position in said company, like senior game developer or other things. But it's nice to be in a career that is well compensated, especially in the year 2025. And so now comes the part where I tell you all about this beginner course. But before I get there, there's a question about what's a way to meet people who also like to develop games. I think the internet is your friend. There's a ton of different sub communities. Like if you live in a major city, it's so easy. There's so many little, oh, we have a game developer meetup on Thursdays. There's also like Discord channels. Unity has an official Discord channel. There's like subreddits. There's so many online ways to meet other developers, and it's really nice actually because it's how you build community. So this course is a 16-week course that will teach you game development. Our goal is to get you job ready. Like at the end of the course, our goal is that you will be able to succeed in an entry level position. So you'll learn maybe that's on the next slide. Yeah, you'll learn the basics of C sharp. You'll learn Unity. You'll learn everything you need to know to make your own games, and you'll have two completed projects for your personal portfolio. It's not on this slide. Maybe it's on the next slide, but we'll also do interview prep. As someone who's on the other side of interviewing now, and I interview a lot of people, I can tell you the key things that I look for in portfolios. I can tell you the key things that I look for in interview questions, the key hiccups and whatnot. But yeah, I think that the goal of this course is to just get you ready for a potential entry level position. Um, what kind of games will you be able to make? Well, you'll have a strong enough foundation that you can build whatever you want. You'll get two courses in the game. We're repeating a lot of stuff on these slides. But yeah, you'll need to know everything to land your first job. Yeah, that was everything I said before, right? Okay, here's it a third time. But yeah, a lot of this, like, yeah, you're going to learn like uh 2D elements, 3D elements, how to create your own game worlds, UI. Yeah. We'll cover, okay, I will say this last point, launching your game to the world. I don't know how much of that we'll cover. That is actually pretty self-explanatory. It's the least fun part of game development. When you have a game and you're trying to put it on the Google Play App Store or the Apple App Store, it's the worst experience of your life. But yeah, we're probably not going to cover that because it's just, okay, what is the title? What is this? What is that? What's your description? And it's like, what? I have to come up with a description for the game. How can I make this sound interesting? Because it is interesting, but how can I don't know. I didn't go to school for game description. So, not my forte. Yeah, and you'll come out of this with uh you'll be able to make a game. Sorry, I apologize for the repetitiveness of some of these slides, but you'll be able to make a really awesome game by the end of this course. I'm gonna skip through. Yeah, just a timeline. So I mentioned it's a 16-week course. There will be 3 classes a week, and you'll be able to message me at any time, and I'll be able to help you with like tips or, oh, my code's not working, or what's this, what's that. I want to hear more about this, and I'll just basically be a resource to you. And you'll get some real world experience for your portfolio, a little bit of career coaching, like I mentioned, interview prep, and yeah, all the classes are recorded, so you can watch them at your own time. You can watch them on double speed, you can watch them at half speed. Um, yeah, and here's a fun, handy dandy little QR code that if you sign up today, today or tomorrow, you get a pretty hefty discount, about a quarter off. So, yeah, I think that's our. I'm gonna leave this QR code up. I'm gonna quickly. Yeah, yeah. That's our final slide. Thank you all for coming. Are there any other questions? I'm just gonna leave a little bit of time for people to ask questions. I see some people are dropping off. Um, so if anyone has any questions, thank you all so much for coming. I hope you learned a little bit about game development. I hope to see you all tomorrow at the same time. And yeah, that was just a little bit of a foray into game development. Tomorrow we'll dive a bit more into Unity, and we'll get to see things a little bit deeper. Yeah, thank me. No, thank you. Yeah. If there can you give me structure on what? Yes. So there, I believe on the actual black screen website, there is a detailed this week you'll do this, this week you'll do this, this week you'll do that. If not, it'll be updated and very soon. But yeah, it's basically walking you through the intro of Unity for the first couple weeks, getting you up to speed with coding, quick crash course in coding, and then you'll be learning how to use C# in conjunction with Unity. We'll cover a little bit of animation. However, I've got some tips and tricks on how to, because I'm a developer, I'm not an artist. So, how to get quick animations in. We'll finish a smaller game, and then, excuse me, we'll spend a large chunk of the class, excuse me, on the larger game. And yeah, okay, thank you all. I think I might call it here. It doesn't seem like there's any other questions. You've been a lovely audience, and I think I'm going to end the session now. Take care. Have a nice night, everyone.